Welcome, everybody, to the House of Nerd podcast. I'm here with you, Josh, and as always, my friend, Crit. That was really rough.
It's okay. Just keep going.
All right, Crit. Let's get talking about this. First topic that we have talking about is on this inaugural podcast. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's true to my heart, and that's been something that I've done since I was, I think, 6 or 7, was watch Star Wars. I can remember as being a kid, we had a friend in our neighborhood, this just popped into my head, that used to play with us in the neighborhood, and he had like this pirated version of Star Wars, and then when we'd watch it, he had a cape that was made out of a trash bag and a wooden sword, and he always had to be Darth Vader, and I always had to be Luke Skywalker. So that just shows you kind of like how much I truly have loved Star Wars all my life. But
many hands cut off, huh?
So many hands, so many Princess Leia's saved too. Not only did we have one Princess Leia, but we had 2 Princess Leias. My sister and his sister both had to be Princess Leia. So so that's so we had to save them, and we had to swing from the tree a lot to save them. Excuse me. But so starting off with this kind of inaugural podcast, I wanted to kind of go through. We talked about going through our favorite Star Wars movies in order, and kind of give it an explanation of kind of why they're good, why we like them, and we kind of started to do them in the order that we like the most to the least. So I will get started here, and then we'll have Crit following me here in just a minute. But first of all, in my favorite order of movies, first of all, I went with Empire Strikes Back. And the reason I went with Empire Strikes Back is it was the movie that kind of caught my eye. I loved Star Wars all my life. But the one thing that I really, truly loved was Empire Strikes Back. I loved the walkers. It was also the first, kind of large fight that we got between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. That was something that always, that battle in Sky City always just kind of blew my mind, and how they put that together and stuff. And then the carbonite scene, that was just, so the walkers, yeah, those 3 are just blow my mind. And then I guess the next one I'd have to go with was A New Hope. And A New Hope, I just went with that one because it's my favorite. It's the one that, well, it's the one that started me all off on this. And even though I like Empire Strikes Back the most, I like New Hope still that much, almost first. It's always been a little hard to go between the two, but Empire Strikes Back always seems to beat out a little bit.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And stuff. And then I'd have to go with Return of the Jedi. And it's not, there's nothing really. I think the only thing I dislike about Return of the Jedi that I have a little bit of a hard time with is I'm not a big fan of the Jabba the Hutt scene. For some reason, it kind of, I feel like it gets started a little slow.
So it's not the Ewoks. You're fine with the Ewoks. It's Jabba the Hutt.
It's the very beginning, yeah. It's kind of, I feel like it starts the show slow, and then once they get into the blowing up the Death Star part and the attack on Endor and all this stuff, I'm totally in. I'm game on. So, but no, you would think that would be the Ewoks, but it's definitely not. But then, okay, so the next one would have to be number 4 would be The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is definitely, it kind of reinvigorated my Star Wars attitude, because once we'd come off a lot of the prequels, I was like, it was just so when it came to Star Wars. But The Force Awakens kind of reinvigorated, even though it's a lot like A New Hope. It had enough new things in it that kind of kept me kind of going and get back interested in Star Wars again. Not that I totally fell off, but. And then number 5 would have to be my favorite of the prequel series is Revenge of the Sith. And that was one of the prequels that made it like it felt like Star Wars to me. Like that initial fight at the very beginning with Count Dooku and all of that. It's kind of sucked me in. The only other one that let's go back down to the Rise of Skywalker, which would be number 6. And the Rise of Skywalker I put here, and I had kind of a dilemma because I really liked The Last Jedi. So many things about The Last Jedi that were so amazing that I liked, especially, we'll get to that in a sec with The Last Jedi, but The Rise of Skywalker, even though it had so many things that were just, I didn't understand, they weren't explained very well. Overall, I did enjoy The Rise of Skywalker, and that's probably why I chose Rise of Skywalker a little bit more over The Last Jedi, is I think I had a little bit more fun with The Rise of Skywalker versus The Last Jedi, even though there are some very solid stuff with The Last Jedi. What's that?
That makes sense.
Yeah. And with The Last Jedi, oh god, that throne room scene is just fantastic. That's one big scene that kind of just sticks out to me in that movie. I think that lightsaber fight is just one of the more epic fights that have gone down in all of Star Wars, and with Rey and Kylo Ren. So that's one of the reasons I really picked Last Jedi for what it was. It barely edged out. And the more and more I thought about it, I almost, if I went back, almost would put Last Jedi over The Rise of Skywalker. But I still left it in its place. Number 8, I picked The Phantom Menace. And I just, like I was telling you not too long ago, I rewatched this about 3 weeks ago when we got Disney Plus. And one of the things that I really liked about The Phantom Menace was I actually liked it more than I remembered.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people I know poo-poo this. In the very beginning of it, I don't like it as much still. But what I really found myself really enjoying is once they get to Tatooine and they start doing the pod races and all that stuff. So basically from about the middle on, I really, really, really liked the movie. And I had more fun with it than I remembered that I did when I originally, from the last time I'd seen it.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's grown with age. I don't know.
No, it's fair enough.
But number 9, the worst one I think I disliked the most, though there are some things in there, of course I like, is Attack of the Clones. I had to put that one at the bottom of my list. And the dialogue in that when they're on Naboo and they're having all the relationship stuff and it's just drudgery. I feel like I'm just like going through quicksand or something, viscous to try to get through that part of the movie. And there are good parts. The last scene is pretty good in the arena with all the Jedis coming in and stuff, where you get to see Mace Windu's purple lightsaber and stuff. But overall, the movie is just not amazing. It's pretty bad. Oh boy. Anyways, that's my top 9. Those are my likes and dislikes. It'd be hard to sway me against number 1. For the rest of them, you might be able to sway me a little bit on some of these ones, but not too much. What do you got, Crit?
All right. So for number 1, I have The Last Jedi. I actually like the direction that they took, where they started to kind of de-emphasize the Skywalkers and kind of the family aspect of it. I thought that was a really great place to take the story.
I agree.
Yeah, it gave the ability for future storytellers to continue, keep moving on the same timeline. And that's I always thought that was interesting. Plus, there's Holdo's Last Stand. That was just breathtaking. Having the entire audience gasp out loud at the movie theater was really impressive. I know people don't like Canto Bite. I've kind of softened on that as far as not liking it.
Yeah, you have
around it, but it's still not an amazing piece of set piece for the movie for me. But I don't hate it. So that's my number 1. My number 2 is A New Hope, the original version, not the um, the newer edits and stuff like that, which is kind of hard to get. I think only my parents have a copy of A New Hope that's the original.
I've got one.
Yeah, I'll have to borrow from you again one time. I don't know. Is the Disney Plus's versions of it just the newer versions with the additional CGI?
Yeah, they have it. And honestly, the one I have is the original. When they first released the DVD, they released the unedited version of Star Wars along with the DVD, but it's in a really weird format, so it doesn't look super great.
Oh, well, that sucks. So anyway, A New Hope's second, mostly because it's what starts this whole thing off. So it kind of sets up the universe, sets up some of the rules, sort of, introduce you to the major characters. It does a good job at all that. I think it's very entertaining. Number 3, I have Empire Strikes Back. Mostly for the same reasons you do. The walkers are cool. The way the movie is put together and the story that it tells and the reveals that it has are just a lot of fun. And it's kind of, I can't remember really being bored during it.
Absolutely.
The plot and the characters and everything. I thought it was great. Number 4, I have The Force Awakens. I think it was an excellent opener to this last trilogy in that it sets up all these characters. It kind of gets everything moving. It gives you some awe-inspiring moments. It has a, it kind of really does step up, in my mind, in my experience, steps up Star Wars into the 2010s and kind of movie making style. And
well, you always talk about that. You talk about the Kylo Ren scene at the very beginning that you love. Yeah.
So those are some cool moments, and I think so I really enjoyed those. Number 5, I have Return of the Jedi, mostly because it was a really great closer to the original trilogy. I think.
I agree with you.
I mean, there was some. I'm not 100% on the Ewoks, and there's definitely some like very weird ineptitudes in the Empire. But I guess that's kind of, the Empire is always kind of like, I don't know how they're still in power throughout the entire set of movies, because they're not amazing at anything they do.
Those stormtroopers, man, they can sure hit a side of a, what do they say, the broadside of a barn?
Yeah. So yeah, Return of the Jedi's is pretty good. So on number 6, I have Revenge of the Sith, and that one's mostly because that came out right when extreme martial arts was a big deal, and people were doing a lot of kind of the fancier, acrobatic fighting styles and stuff like that. And I was hardcore into it, watching any videos I could get my hands on of that type of stuff. And, the Revenge of the Sith had all that kind of in a movie. It's like, all the sword play that everybody's like, oh, this is ridiculous. They're just, they're not even trying to hit each other. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, you have laser guns that aren't pinpoint accurate. You have, there's all sorts of stuff about this universe that don't make any sense. I mean, you have, I could go on and on, but anyway, the Jedi are out of memory within a generation. That doesn't make any sense, considering there were thousands of them and they were basically everywhere.
That blows my mind.
So
whatever, that's all I can say about that.
So it's a silly world. It's a silly universe anyway. So I don't know. I don't take it that seriously, and that really lets me kind of enjoy the best parts of Revenge of the Sith. And so that's why it's up that high. And then right below that is The Rise of Skywalker. I think the set pieces and the, kind of how it was shot, some of the ideas in it were interesting. But what really kind of pulls me out of the movie is the constant walk back from my favorite, which is The Last Jedi. So if The Last Jedi is my favorite, Rise of Skywalker won't be as entertaining for me, because it's just like, well, they just undercut all of the things I found interesting in the previous movie. So, and
I agree with you. I mean, like, that's what the whole front of the movie is like. And I know we'll go into this here in a minute, a little bit more in depth, but
yeah,
the whole walk back thing. It's like, oh, come on, get over with, get up, get done with it, and get on with the movie.
Yeah, I just kind of wish they hadn't taken it in that direction, and kind of left it, and
Kind of
like you
left
said,
Rian Johnson's vision. Yeah.
yeah, we'll get into that, but
Yep.
yeah, it's an interesting one, but it's down there. The one I have after that is The Phantom Menace. Again, some fun moments, but not something I'm really like wanting to run back and watch again. And then after that is Attack of the Clones, which is the same thing. It's like it has some parts in it that are interesting, but for the most part, I don't really want to go watch it again.
No, I agree with those last two. I mean, like Phantom Menace, the Gungans. That's what. That's my big beef with Phantom Menace. Is anytime that the Gungans are in there, any of them, it loses me.
Yeah, and I don't think that the trade dispute is an interesting story.
No, it's quite boring, actually.
I mean, I don't know who that storyline was for, but yeah,
George Lucas. I don't know.
and if it is, more power to him.
More power to him.
Yeah, I mean, you make the. I'm a firm believer in you make the story that you want to make. Whether the audience accepts it or not, that's something that happens after you release it. You don't have any choice after that. But you should try to stay true to yourself as an artist.
You look at that. You look at two other movies that we really like. The Last Jedi was like that. Empire Strikes Back was like that a lot. They did have a different vision. They did go off on their own, and I think because of that, we got two really good movies that could have landed or might have just kerplunked and nobody would like it. And if we really think about it, Empire Strikes Back was not well received when it first came out. It was actually kind of, it wasn't a bomb, but it was definitely not liked. So
yeah, and I think there's an interesting idea here is that the Last Jedi and the Empire Strikes Back adds so much depth and color to the stories that they're trying to tell in their trilogies. And if they weren't there, you'd basically just have Fast and Furious in space. It wouldn't. You'd have characters you might or might not like, but you wouldn't be torn up about you wouldn't be invested in the characters to the degree that I think people are.
Right. Fast and Furious in space. I crack up every time you bring that one up. But you're right. You're right. And stuff. I agree with that. That's those ones. I really wish, like with Empire, that Return of the Jedi kind of went in a different way. It went a little bit lighthearted. There's always people talking about how George Lucas was more pointing that at children because he thought Empire Strikes Back was a little too dark, and Last Jedi maybe the same way. I mean, they take it in a unique way, and apparently the people didn't like it enough. But I look at Last Jedi as being the Empire Strikes Back of this new trilogy. So it is.
Yeah, it's just I don't think nothing in Return of the Jedi rolled back what happened in the Empire Strikes Back.
No, I'm talking just the tone. I
know it's just it just makes it if you have the next movie undo what the middle movie did, that's gonna reflect worse on the middle movie.
Agreed.
I think that I don't think over time people have kind of maybe turned the corner a little bit on Empire Strikes Back and are starting to think of it as a cherished movie that they like, that is a good part of the original trilogy, maybe even the best part for some like us.
Good point.
I'm not sure The Last Jedi is gonna have that same type of thing, just because the next movie undoes a lot of this stuff on it, or at least tries to. It almost feels like a retcon a little bit, of the movie before it, and so because of that, now Last Jedi is no longer kind of telling the same story that The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker are.
No, and that's very clear. They even came out just recently and said in the news that they didn't have a path. They didn't have an overarching story. They just left it to the writers to supposedly do that. To mentally okay, tie this one to this one, kind of like the original trilogy. The original trilogy didn't really have I mean, there was a few ideas that George Lucas had, but George Lucas didn't think he was going to get a second. He had no clue he was going to get a second. Matter of fact, he had a horrible prequel or a horrible trilogy that wasn't even close to this one about kyber crystals that he had written. He thought he was going to have to do it at a really cheap, low budget, and ended up having to be able to do Empire. So, anyways, yeah, it's just. I think I agree with you though with The Last Jedi though. It's I don't think it's going to be looked at as well. Even though I hope that in the future there's possibilities of other directors picking up in the Star Wars universe some of the threads that Rian Johnson left with, the overarching anybody can have the Force and things like that. It doesn't have to be just be a Skywalker. Even though The Last Jedi kind of, Rise of Skywalker kind of muted that quite a bit.
Well, speaking of the Rise of Skywalker, do you want to move on to the discussion?
Let's do it. We're looking about, it's about time to move on. So let's talk about the goods and stuff. What did you find good in Rise of Skywalker? I'll be honest, even though I liked it quite a bit, I thought it was a fun movie, I really struggled to find a lot of the good. Other than it was fun.
And yet you put it above The Last Jedi.
I don't think I'm going to live that down, am I?
No, probably not.
No, I mean, that's the thing. I kept going, well, what? This is a fun movie. It was a fun movie, and that's the only reason I put it a little bit higher than Rise of Skywalker, or sorry, The Last Jedi. And I'm one of those people that are really down on the Canto Bight parts of The Last Jedi, and that's kind of really what takes me out of it a little bit, even though I know that you've kind of turned me around a little bit more on that. But, some of the big things I guess I wrote down here was I liked the little bit lighter tone compared to The Last Skywalker. It was a little bit more of the same tone, of course, because to The Force Awakens, because J.J. Abrams was doing it, of course. So, I mean, I liked that a little bit, even though I really did like, the little bit darker tone in The Last Jedi. I really liked that Lando Calrissian was in this.
Really? Okay.
I don't think they used him efficiently.
Okay.
I really like seeing him there though, and I really think that, and I'll talk a little bit about this, my bads about Lando Calrissian, but I thought it was, even though they were playing to, that kind of nostalgia that they're trying to do all this time, I really liked that he was there. I just wish they would have used him better. That's all. But it was still fun to see him in the movie.
Right.
I think it had a lot of good action sequences. That was the other thing that I think I really liked about it. So those are actually the four things that I really the four good things that really stuck out of my mind a little bit. I mean, I guess I could do a little bit more in depth. There was probably a few other things I really liked about the movie, but those are the ones that when I started thinking about it, stuck out to me the most.
Okay. Do you want to go on your bad, or do you want me to do my good?
Yeah, you go. You do your good.
Okay. I don't have that many good because it was pretty low on my list. I think the action was followable. I think there was never any confusion about who, where anybody was. So it basically had good cinematography, good setup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know enough about cinematography to be like, oh, it had great cinematography or it had terrible cinematography. I could follow everything that was going on. I wasn't confused by where people were and, kind of what was going on, which I guess is, maybe for some people it's the bare minimum, but, I've seen a lot of movies that's, especially action wise, that you just can't really follow. So that's pretty good. I mean, other than that, I don't really have a whole lot. I can't think of anything that I haven't listed.
I know it's tough.
That's not a lot of good. I know that's not a lot of good, and I could probably find some more if I sat down and watched it again.
Me too.
And I do want to see it again. That's the other issue, is that we're doing this, but I've only seen it once, and I'm going off of memory. And
in all honesty, I actually had to look back at a few sequences. I totally had forgotten how some of the sequences had connected to each other. which is really horrible speaking to the movie, because it's like, how it hasn't even been that long since I've seen it, and I can't remember how the movie progresses.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty
From
bad.
part to part to part, because it's so many like go here, go there scenes, you know?
Right.
God.
Yep. Lots of fetch quests.
Well, let's talk about that. You brought that up.
Okay.
5 major fetch quests, to be honest with you. I mean,
yeah, what were they?
What's that?
What were they? There was like the
dagger.
The dagger, yeah.
The
Then
translation with C-3PO.
Yeah.
So the translation itself, and then having to wire C-3PO to, for some reason, because he couldn't read the dumb translation, which it just pisses me off, by the way. That makes me, I just don't get that. How can he know it, but he can't say it out loud? Come on.
I hear you.
The 2 different cubes. So the one oh god.
Yep.
Okay, that part, we can talk about that more in a sec, but that cube MacGuffin totally made me mad, especially when she found it and then it was taken away from her again.
Right.
Or I should say destroyed. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get mad here in a sec. And then Rey herself kind of be a living MacGuffin. Because, you know, she had finding out who she is, what she is, her past, you know.
Well, so are we abandoning the good bad portion of it and just talking about it, or are you listing that as part of your bad?
No, that's my bad. That's part of my bad. And stuff. Well, you brought up the MacGuffins, and sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. So go ahead and list your bad. It
triggered me, Crit.
I hear you.
Okay, if we want to go down my bad, I said I hated the first part of the movie, that they were looking for something, and this just goes into what I was just saying. They ended up, they were looking for something, ended up just being broken, and had to lead to something else. So it seemed like anything they went looking for, you know, especially that cube, it just led to something else and something else. The dagger to the find it. What's that?
It was National Treasure without Nicolas Cage, which is bad. If you got to have Nicolas Cage if you're gonna do National Treasure.
I never thought about it that way. That's actually a great way to put it. And you're right, and it made me so mad. Why couldn't they just said at the very beginning of the crawl they found the Sith Wayfinder? I can't even remember the name of it. And you know, to get to Exegol.
Yeah, I don't know. And they did do a pretty large time jump, I thought.
Yeah, they did.
I mean, you know, Rey was supposed to be training for like, what, months, a year? I don't remember exactly.
I think it was a couple years, wasn't it?
Yeah, like maybe a couple years.
Yeah. And, so that whole beginning of that movie, it was just, there could have been so much more Star Wars that could have been made if we didn't have all of the chase scenes. All the MacGuffin scenes. That's really what... that makes me mad.
But I mean, the number one problem is they wanted to bring back Palpatine. If they didn't do that, if they stuck with Kylo Ren being the new big bad, because that's what the previous 2 movies were setting up.
Yes, they were.
You know, it was the maturation of Kylo Ren as the new Sith Lord, you know, kind of taking over... you know, the First Order / Empire, however that's supposed to work out. Mm-hmm. I'm still not 100% clear on what the First Order is compared to the Empire, but you know, they seem to still have all their funding and can create, you know, dozens of Star Destroyers underneath ice. Yeah, which you know, okay, I'll put in the good of Rise of Skywalker is rule of cool. It's a lot of scenes that are cool to look at and you can have fun with. Like just the idea of like just seeing all those ships, you know, kind of break the crust of the ice and rise into the air. I mean, that's a cool screensaver.
Oh, it's super awesome.
Yeah. It makes no sense whatsoever. you would build those starships probably in orbit or on the surface. You wouldn't build them underneath the ice.
No.
And since the place was so hard to get to, there's no reason why those things wouldn't already be up, staged in space. Because you have to have a secret Sith MacGuffin to even get there. Like you can't even get through the cloud or anything to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a lot of rule of cool, and I'm okay with that on a surface level. It's like, oh, that's what makes us entertaining is that we have, crazy shots and great CGI and well put together set pieces. The set pieces themselves, though, just don't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's Palpatine and the giant lightning column that takes out starships. That's a rule of cool. You're doing it because you can. You're not doing it because it makes sense that that he should be that powerful. Yeah.
No.
And then on top of that, if they pull Palpatine, then suddenly you have, you have a story where Kylo Ren's the bad guy, the antagonist, and your protagonist can actually work at it, that type of thing. I think they tried to rush so hard towards the redemption of Kylo Ren that first, I think for me it fell flat.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, okay, he's good now. Well, I like him as a character and I like the actor, so I'm like, okay, I guess I'm okay with this. But it's just like, the universe is going to. I think if they'd have left Kylo Ren as the antagonist and had focused on the redemption arc for him,
mm-hmm.
that would have made. I think the problem is that they wouldn't have had any screen time for the other characters, and they wouldn't have had. Maybe they wouldn't have had time enough to take Rey where maybe they wanted her to go. But at the same time, I think all of it kind of fell flat because of Palpatine. Pulling him back in. And
I agree with you because that's one of my next beefs is we don't know anything about any of the other characters still.
Yeah, it's.
We learned Poe was a smuggler. I mean, that was about it.
Yeah.
Well, I could have guessed that.
Yeah, the other thing too was that low stakes. Death doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an interesting theory from another show, I think, where they were talking about how J.J. Abrams might not know how to deal with death and kind of lingering on the idea of it, letting the characters kind of process it and letting the audience process it.
I've heard that same as well.
They're dead, and then, oh no, but they're back alive. Don't worry. We can keep having fun now because they're back alive. We don't need to spend any time on grief or sorrow.
Well, you're talking exactly about like when Princess Leia died.
Yeah.
I mean, she died, and I mean, he didn't even. There was no like lingering at all. Okay, she's dead.
Yeah, so like I said, it just felt like there were low stakes. That the stakes weren't actually that high. As far as I guess the stakes didn't feel that high because the consequences didn't hit anybody.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Like, oh, they're dead, but then they're alive, but then they're dead, but then live, and then the only person that that really gets to die is Kylo. Because they can't get Adam Driver for another movie. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't feel sincere. It doesn't feel, at least to me.
I agree.
My number one bad is Palpatine and that whole storyline. Like, it's just, you jettison that and you go back to the writer's room and you figure out something that's more, maybe smaller, but more cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I mean, everything else could still work.
Well, I've got one that it's just, I'm like, I kind of hinted at it when we talked the other day about this one, and let me just put it this way: am I taking crazy pills? But are there people riding on horses on the freaking outside of a Star Destroyer without like spacesuits, with no explanations?
Yeah,
anything.
I don't know.
It makes no sense.
Did one of the writers come from like Avatar or something? I don't know.
I don't get it. Like the whole time, honestly, I'll be honest with you. When I was in the movie, that completely took me out of that scene. And I know he was going for that cool scene again. That cool thing.
Really cool.
Really cool. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, how are they breathing? How are they not dying? How are they on the outside of how do they land on the outside of that Star Destroyer? and just attack everything.
How does the Star Destroyer not just tilt?
Yeah. I mean, come on. Okay, that just so took me out of the movie. I actually, it took me a little while to kind of recover after that one because I was just scratching my head for so long on that part of the movie. Mm-hmm. Holy moly!
Yeah, I think the final. There were some parts in the final confrontation.
Yeah.
That I thought were interesting, but they're the smaller parts. The big set pieces were just, well, that's neat to see, but I don't care. Mm-hmm. I just don't care about the outcome of this. I'm just going to sit here and watch this explosions on screen and fancy lights and nice CGI and everything else like that. And it's going to be fine. I'm getting what I paid for. I'm not bitter about it. But at the same time, I don't care. None of it.
Here comes Lando to save the day with all of these like crazy ships from where I have no idea that he just pulled out of his butt.
I still don't think Lando needed to be in the movie. I think they had plenty of characters and they could have given the part to go and get the other ships could have gone to
Poe.
Yeah, it could have gone to Poe, could have gone to Finn, could have, well, I mean, there's all sorts of characters they could have pulled in to do that we've got a connection to in this trilogy. Literally pulling Lando out of nowhere is just, it's just nostalgia bait.
Well, it is, and it totally is nostalgia bait. Here's the thing that ticks me off, and that's what I wanted to say about Lando, because I know we're getting a little bit long on time. But the one thing I want to say on Lando is, they had a whole storyline there, okay? An entire storyline about Lando. If you just watch the movie, it fell so flat, like on him. It was neat to see him and stuff, but at the very end, where he goes, "Hey, let's see who your parents are." Well, what did that mean? Well, I found out later that there had been, and I guess JJ is popular in doing this. He's famous for putting story plots of a movie in a comic book. He's done it. He did it on Force Awakens too. The whole C-3PO thing of why he had a red arm. That was all in a comic book, but it was not explained one bit in the movie.
Yeah, that's his whole mystery box thing.
Yeah, and it just doesn't do, because people aren't going to go. Most people are not going to read that comic book and have no idea that the reason why Lando was so interested in that was because in the comic book it talks about him losing a daughter to the First Order, and he was on that planet looking for his daughter because that was the last place she was.
Well, it feels like artificial depth. Then it's like, okay, there's extended stories out from here, and if you're savvy, then you'll figure this out, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But like the red arm on C-3PO does not affect my enjoyment or of The Force Awakens at all. Mm-hmm. Didn't even notice it. Didn't even care to notice it. The problem with Lando is that he's just, first of all, he's just an NPC on a fetch quest. They have to talk to get the idea of where to go next. And then the next part is that they spend screen time and dialogue, setting up something that really doesn't matter to the actual story that's being told. Which is fine. I guess, especially if they're going to reincorporate it later. But at this point in time, it's like, this doesn't make any sense. And if it's incorporated in a comic, that's great and all, but you'd think it just doesn't feel like it was done with a deft hand. It felt clumsy, what it felt like. Mm-hmm. And then just having him be the person that flies the fleet in, that right there feels just straight up pandering. It's like, oh, we've got Lando, so we should use him, And it's like, well, but you have all these other characters that we're actually invested in this story, as opposed to the previous story in the past. And why can't you use them to do the major actions and that type of stuff? If you're going to go for this, fly in, saves the day hero moment, there's a lot of characters that
he was playing to the Return of the Jedi. He did the exact same thing in Return of the Jedi. It was like that whole feeling of, here we go, as he starts flying into the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. It's like, oh, here's Billy D back, doing kind of a similar thing of leading the last battle, like in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, okay, so it's a callback, but it
absolutely is, but it's not
an artificial
a good one.
Callback, because the thing about the the original trilogy is that was part of his character and his story. He was a major aspect of that story. This trilogy, he's not. And there's room there to use the current characters to do the things that they want to do. But it felt like somebody was like, you know, it would be neat if we gave this part to, you know, Lando and let him do it. People are going to love, the fans are going to love that. It's like, well, but what about the story? Like the current one you're trying to tell right now.
What about all the people you could use? Poe, Finn, Rose Tico.
Especially how bad they treated Finn in the Rise of Jedi.
Oh, awful. Yeah.
They didn't do anything with him, and he had the most interesting setup from the beginning of the trilogy.
That's one of my beefs. So that's one of my bads. You know, with him, you didn't learn. He never grew ever. He didn't grow one time since the first one. Crit. And
to be fair, in the Last Jedi, they didn't know what to do with him either. There, I think.
Agreed. That's why he went to Counterpart.
Yeah, I think I heard someone say before that he learned the same lesson that he had already learned in the previous movie. So, you know, he'd already been the coward that learned to turn around and actually face the problem and become a hero in the first movie. And then in the second movie, he did the same thing again. And it's like, Yeah, like I said, I don't think they knew what to do with him, and that kind of sucks because Abrams actually set him up really well, or at least the crew that worked with Abrams on the first one.
I agree with that. That's one of he's good for that kind of stuff. He may not be great for endings, but he is definitely good for setting things up. You just said, mystery box things. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just sucks in the follow through sometimes.
Well, did that cover everything?
I think we did. I think we had a successful podcast tonight.
We had some hiccups and some coughing and some stuff we need to fix, but you know, this is how we learn.
This is the inaugural podcast, so we'll get better from here.
For sure.
So all right.
All right.
Well, I appreciate you on here, and we'll be back again with the podcast of the House of Nerd podcast at a soon to be said date, and we appreciate anybody who's come on here to listen that has listened to our podcast. Have a good night.